And welcome to the October 13th meeting of the Milton Conservation Commission. Commissioners are appointed by the Board of Selectmen in the town of Milton to implement the rules and regulations of the State Wetlands Protection Act and the town bylaw that governs the wetlands protection. As a matter of formality, first we keep a recording of what's going on. We've had some audio problems before because I guess there's a local television broadcasting as well. So if you'd like to speak, come forward and identify yourself, but just stay very close to the mics. We've had some difficulties with that of late. But as a matter of formality, we always introduce ourselves.
Judith Darrell Kemp.
My name is John Kiernan.
Michael Blute.
Arthur Doyle.
And now I'm going to find the agenda. There, thanks. First on the agenda is abbreviated notice of intent, 0 Central Avenue, town of Milton is the applicant. That's the Hendry's project. Anne-Marie Fagan, would you approach and tell us what you'd like? We are going to have a site walk on the 31st of October, which is a public meeting. So we won't have to, if there's a request for continuance on this issue, we will not have to wait until next month. But we can actually hear this issue, which relates to the demolition of the Hendry's plant at Central and Elliott Street. So we are meeting in public session on October 31st, which is a Saturday. We typically begin at 8 a.m. in the morning, and all are invited to attend. If you would like a continuance, our next meeting will be the 31st.
Yes, at this time, the town is requesting a continuance on this abbreviated notice of intent. I did, however, give you a letter this evening that revises the direction in which the town will be coming in on that property to demolish that property. Originally, we said we were going to be coming in over the parking lot, which was a concern because of the underground storage tanks. We have now reached an agreement with the Conleys that we're going to be coming in from the westerly portion of the building when we take the building down. So I wanted you to have that letter, and then I am going to ask for a continuance to October 31st.
Was that the last issue that was kind of holding things up? Or you feel like everything is lined up now to go? Or
I think there's a couple more small, minor issues that we need to take care of, and that's why we need to have the continuance till October 31st.
We need to have some data so that we know what the means and methods are. Right. We have the means and methods in the construction plan from the Conleys for the main part of the building, but we need to make sure that we have appropriate means and methods because I anticipate we'll be imposing the same kinds of conditions as we did to the Conleys. So we're just trying to coordinate that, and in order to do that, the town needs some additional time to get the construction plans and needs and methods reduced to writing.
they're still trying to use the same contractor to do both buildings. Is that correct? Or
I believe that's
Yes.
correct.
that is?
Yes.
Okay, what's the letter being referred to?
Oh, it's, that's the first letter, and this is the backup to it. When I printed mine, this just came in today. So that's the back. You have the front page.
Okay.
I think we all have a copy of it, but I just happen to have printed mine sideways.
Do you want to read that into the record, just refer to it?
Sure, that's a good idea, Judith. This is dated 10/13. It's a letter from Joe Prondak, who is the Milton Building Commissioner, and it says, Dear Chairman Kiernan, this letter will serve to confirm that the demolition operation of the town-owned building, known as 0 Central Avenue, will proceed from the westerly end of the building, working toward Central Avenue. We will not be utilizing the vacant parcel of land on the immediate corner of Elliott Street and Central Avenue, so as not to jeopardize the integrity of the underground fuel oil storage tanks on that parcel. Sincerely, Joseph Prondak, Milton Building Commissioner. And it's on that basis that I recommend that we approve the continuance to our next public meeting on Saturday morning, October 31st.
Yes.
Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next on the agenda, if we can, I think this is a very short one, and we've got a long list tonight. If I could ask the indulgence of the public and take number 12 first. This is a request for an extension of the order of conditions at 153, 155, and 157 Hillside Street. DEP number 046-0422. It's an extension. This is not an extension that falls within the automatic extension time. And Kathy, I don't know what the date of our extension is here. But I think August 2012 is the end of the, and for the public, the legislature had passed a law to automatically extend permits that have been granted within time parameters, basically 2008 until 2012.
And this is December 2012.
This is December of 2012, so that typically we have in the past, and I've been on the commission 23 years, we typically extend orders of conditions because typically you have 3 years to complete the project, but if folks come back, applicants come back and say we need additional time, then we generally treat those favorably. And in fact, as a matter of custom and practice, the legislature automatically did it from 2008 until August of 2012. This application was approved, and this is the driveway portion of the, no, we didn't have any other proposal before us other than the driveway, but this is at 153, 157 Hillside Street. So if we could hear that one first, I think that'll be brief. I believe it is. Do we have the applicant here?
Todd Hamilton.
Thank you, sir.
We got tied up with one of the lots with the abutters 2.5 years in court, so we couldn't do anything. So that's, we've worked it out, and that's why we asked for the continuance. So now we'll be coming back in here through the winter months with a new plan that we've worked out with all the abutters. I have support with everybody and with 300 feet of the property, a support letter and everything.
From everybody.
Everybody, all abutters and with 300 feet.
Sir, I salute you.
It was not an easy task, but everybody's in favor of it, and including Jim Corliss.
Good to hear.
Yes.
This is the property that extends over to Ford Ranch Road as well on that
Correct.
side. Okay.
We're going to change the driveway to Ford Ranch Road and come in and see you people about putting a culvert in and not using the driveway and other things.
Okay.
So I just wanted to extend it. We're working on putting all the plans together and come in formally, and the abutters said they would come in and support it as well in the hearings.
Do you have that letter that you could submit to Kathy?
What?
Do you have that letter of, you said you had a letter?
I had each abutter sign it. I have a stack like this.
Oh, you do?
Yeah, a whole stack.
Could you submit copies of those? To,
Absolutely.
all right.
I wouldn't have come here without it.
Yeah.
I wouldn't waste my time.
Fair enough. Are there any, well, what are you looking for an
We're
extension?
looking to extend it for a 3-year period, because it might take us a year and a half to go through the permitting, and then we can start construction. So with winters, I just don't know where it's going to land.
Any questions from commissioners? Are there any abutters here or members of the public that would like to make a comment or ask a question? Hearing none, is there a consensus or a concern or a feeling of support to extend this permit?
Yeah, we're in support.
Okay, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Extend it for 3 years?
Yep.
Second?
Second.
Discussion? All in favor? Unanimous? Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you.
All right,
you.
thanks. And we typically try not to take things out of order, but I did anticipate that that might be fast. So we're now back to number 2, request for certificate of compliance, Truman Parkway. This is a Neponset River Esplanade. This is a continued hearing. Good evening and welcome.
Good evening.
Good evening, I'm Stella Lansing from the DCR.
And I'm Peter Reed from BSC Group, the engineer on the project.
What can you tell us?
The project's completed, and we did receive 2 comments. And one was, the photographs were very helpful, by the way. One was a photograph which I believe was looking straight down into the river.
Yep.
And there was some sheet piling or something
Yes.
that had been, and there was a little bit of sludge in between. And we did no work in the river or really even near the river.
Oh, I understood that.
So,
Well, my question was really, did you recognize that that was there? Did you determine what it was, or whether it was something to do with the bridge?
Well, the bridge is not a DCR-owned bridge, it's a DOT-owned
yeah,
bridge.
I don't know if you
Of course.
remember, like, say, it was like 3 or 4 years ago, when they had the transportation reform, and that a lot of the bridges were turned from DCR where they turned over to Mass DOT.
Okay.
So we got a Mass DOT access permit to go on there and do the bike path over the bridge, but they wouldn't let us touch the bridge otherwise. And that's,
Okay.
that leads, that's kind of
Sounds
a
like government at its strongest, right?
that's kind of a segue into the second comment, which was about, you know,
Yeah,
the minor cracks that were in the railing there. As I said, we added the railing above
Right,
because of the bicycles and the height, you
Right.
know.
good idea. Yeah.
Code.
So that's pretty much,
For the benefit of the
Okay.
public, what bridge are you talking about?
this is the bridge on Truman Parkway over the Neponset River.
Paul's Bridge.
No.
This is the one
It's
farther
actually,
north.
and in fact, if you're driving down the road, you may not even see it because it's a stone arch bridge and so you see stone railing of the bridge itself, but because it's an arch, when we did the excavation, it was all earth excavation and we put guardrail right over the bridge. So, and I believe it's half Milton and half Boston is
Yeah.
the city line.
Yep.
Goes right through. the
It's a
bridge.
beautiful project. The path is wonderful, takes you right down to, you know, I can't remember the name of the field.
Well, in fact, do you want
Yeah.
to mention the ultimate goal?
Oh, yes, the ultimate goal is to take it further from Truman, from the Neponset River Parkway
Sure.
via Poles Bridge to the Blue Hills in that side. And then in the other direction, we're working on getting it all the way to Boston Harbor right
Yeah.
now. So
Yeah.
we're building another section,
All the way to Boston
Harbor.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's the ultimate
Oh,
goal.
it's very nice.
Yeah.
And then the central section is the one from Central Ave to Mattapan Square
Sure.
is under construction, and that's
That's going to
quite a
be,
bit
yeah,
of work.
that's going to be done in July 2017, around then.
17.
July or the early fall of 2017.
And they're finishing with the bridge. Is that, they're going to end with the bridge, or they're starting with the bridge now?
Now, which bridge?
The bridge for the Central Ave to Mattapan.
Well, right, they have a bridge over the river from Mattapan
Yeah.
into Milton, but then
That's
there's
at the Ryan Playground?
Yes,
Right.
that's
yes,
correct.
exactly. And then there's a second bridge, which we refer to the Canopy Walk,
Yes.
which is over the MBTA Red Line trolley tracks, right near the yard.
Oh, wait,
And that'll take you to Mattapan Square. Yeah.
that's nice.
Does anybody want a site walk? This is a certificate of compliance, but you've had the opportunity, we've all had an opportunity to do it individually.
I did, I didn't, we did. And
I'm
I-
perfectly
you know,
happy to, I have not walked that area, but in a while anyway.
Yeah.
But I'd be delighted to rely upon your assessment,
Sure.
which is,
It was great. I mean, the only comments, as they say, were relative to the bridge and not to the work that was done.
okay.
But I think we should make some comments to the DOT. I mean, if the bridge is DOT's bridge, then we should kick whoever we need to contact at DOT to tell them.
And your concern was the pointing in the stonework?
Two things. One was the pointing in the stonework. It's deteriorated, and it's going to continue to deteriorate until those stones start to shift and cause problems. And then the bigger concern is what appears to be sludge. There is sheet piling at the base of the stone bridge into the river, basically isolating the base of the bridge from the river. And there appears to be some kind of sludge within the piling and the bridge. I don't know whether it's rust or something but it's that kind of a color, kind of a rust kind of color. So
All right.
Michael, could you put together just a brief one-page letter to this effect that we could send to the DOT, asking for their response and saying that we think it's important to do something for the...
Peter, do you know who the appropriate person to address that to?
Well, Walter Heller is the
Okay, no.
district highway director, and then there was another gentleman who we worked with to get the access permit,
Okay.
Mike, but I could, I mean,
yeah, that would be great. If you
I can furnish you that name if you'd like.
That would be great, and also, Kathy, you could probably call Walter and find out if he is the appropriate person, and if not, who is.
Well, I'm sure if you sent it to Walter, that's probably protocol.
Sufficient.
But I can give you the other name. of the permit engineer. He was the other gentleman that we dealt with.
Fine. If you could give it to Kathy,
Sure.
then we'll know who to
Michael,
address
was
the
there a
letter to.
flapper gate in the area of the sludge?
I was not on the, I basically was looking down probably 25 feet vertically on it. I didn't,
Do you know if there's a flapper gate there? There's not.
I don't know.
You don't know?
What's that?
Do you know, Peter?
If there's a flapper gate?
I don't think it, to me, from the photo, it looked like it was the side of the bridge
Right.
that, so if you're standing in the river looking at the bridge, you see beautiful stone and then the arch where the river flows through. And so the stone, call it the edge side of the bridge, comes down into the river. And it looked like the sheet piling was driven very close to that edge. I mean, I don't know how the, less than
2.5,
foot-
3 feet.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so in that gap there was the sludge, but I'm not aware of any outlets, like drainage outlets, that come through the side of the bridge in that area, that would be discharging anything, so.
All right, any other questions, commissioners? Are there abutters or members of the public that have a question or a comment regarding the Neponset Bikeway? Hearing none, is there a motion to issue the certificate of compliance? No, it's just this section of it, because
Yes.
obviously we don't want it to extend into the portion yet to be developed. Okay. Is there a motion?
Motion? Yeah.
Second.
Discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, unanimous. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank
And
you.
I'll
Good work.
send that to Dan.
The next on the agenda is number 3, notice of intent, 693, 711 Randolph Avenue.
Okay, I will.
Yes, sir.
Take this out for a second.
Good evening, Jim Burke, DeSalle Burke and Associates here representing the project at 711 Randolph Avenue. We'll be looking for an extension, probably, well, I don't think the rubber's going to hit the road until January or so with the appeal, so we'll probably look for something like that.
Okay. I just don't want you to be surprised, because I think going back to June,
Yeah.
when we talked, I think the June meeting, you indicated that the applicant was with you, and you jointly indicated that you wanted to wait for the ZBA's decision to come out.
Right.
And then we put it off until the September meeting. But at that time, there was a discussion about the hydrology study. That's still an issue for us. I didn't want you to be surprised if you came back in January or whenever you're asking for.
And at our last meeting, you asked me to talk to the client strictly about that.
Right.
And I did. And we've submitted the hydrology calcs for that particular study as part of the last submission to the ZBA, and we copied the Conservation Commission on it. The review engineer, niche engineering, reviewed it, didn't have any comments other than the fact that they reviewed it. They didn't say it was good or bad or indifferent. And based on that, you remember the study that said the crossing generated a 6-inch backup, and that 6-inch elevation was contained within the property, and didn't go over the flood. It didn't go over any property lines, and it stayed within the wetland itself. It didn't get outside the 100-foot buffer or anything like that. Or for that matter, the BVW line. So based on that, we're standing by the calculations that we submitted. And if you wanted a separate study done, we're saying that we stand behind the review that the peer review engineer already did, that he doesn't want to bear the cost of it.
Understood, and I think you said essentially the same thing in June.
Right.
Almost verbatim. It's pretty good. My only concern is that data was submitted to the ZBA before the date of a proposal from niche engineering for a further hydrological study, which I saw, I think, the week before the meeting in June. It was during the month of June. Mm-hmm. And that's what I was referring to. And at the time, I didn't know that the ZBA was going to close the hearing and issue their report.
Sure.
And I had suggested to John Leonard that we would be interested in jointly looking at this hydrological study. And I recognize and affirm that you did say that before. I'm just alerting you to the fact that the Conservation Commission may want additional data, additional hydrological analysis done. I didn't want you to be surprised when you come back before us.
If you can direct, myself as the firm and the gentleman who actually did the calculations of what additional information you're looking for, I'm sure I could help you out. And at the same time,
There is a proposal. I think you've got the proposal.
and that's what we did. And I looked at the proposal, I read through it, and that's what we've done.
Well, yeah, but what you did was done in March, and the proposal that I'm referring to is in June, done by Niche Engineering, so they obviously were
the
looking
study,
for something else.
the drainage study, the hydrological study for that culvert was done, I want to say in June itself. And then those drainage calculations were submitted. It wasn't a part of the original submission. It was,
I just know date-wise, I received that proposal from Niche Engineering, and it couldn't have been more than 5 days before our hearing. And
In-
in June, the data that you submitted had been submitted to the ZBA at some time long prior to that date.
yeah, I think we're getting our dates a little bit confused, but at the same time, I don't think it makes much difference because that scope is the same thing as what I provided. Nothing's changed.
Okay, all right. But we don't have to resolve anything tonight.
Sure.
I just didn't want you to be surprised if later on we asked you. And my only point of
like
reference
surprises.
is that my only point of reference is that proposal that I saw in it's probably somewhere around the 15th of June.
Sure. But like I say, there's, as far as this particular project goes, it's kind of held up in a process that I'm not completely familiar with, but I imagine I'm going to become familiar with it fairly quickly. And right now, we're looking for an extension.
Okay.
So, because we still feel the design is proper and
I understand. Any other questions from commissioners? Are there abutters or members of the public that have a question or a comment? Hearing none, you're asking for a continuance until when?
first week in June, first meeting in June, or the only meeting in June?
January.
January, sorry.
January.
June's good too, probably. Yeah.
You are an optimist. I don't have a problem with that. Judith?
No problem.
All right. So with the assent of actually the request of the applicant, is there an agreement? We can take a vote. We agree to continue this until January, the meeting in January, which is typically the second Tuesday. Although sometimes it's not it's the third Tuesday for January. All right. So moved?
So moved.
All in favor?
Yep.
Done. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Number 4 on the agenda is notice of intent, 600 Canton Avenue, that's Winter Valley. This is a continued hearing. Welcome. Nope, nobody's welcome. Oh, the letter is sufficient? Oh, okay, let me see if I can find it so we can read it into the record. Is that, let's see. I probably succeeded in losing it. Now, it's right here. And for the public's sake, this is a letter from, it's an email actually from Sharon Williams. Now, I don't want to misstate her position. I think she's the executive director of Winter Valley? No? Can you help me out? What's her title?
She's the manager of this,
Manager of the site?
the general manager for somebody else.
All right, and this email is dated October 12th, 2015 at 6:09 p.m. And it says, Kathy, addressed to Kathy Bowen, the conservation agent. Because of time constraints, we will not pursue the new parking space issue at this time. However, we may look into this further next year. Thanks. Sharon Williams, manager, Winter Valley Residences. Therefore,
What about the other aspect of cleaning up the mess that's there?
That was all part of,
That's all-
that was all part of it. The only thing that was in question was the parking
Parking,
spaces.
correct. Because we split.
we
Yeah.
split it.
We split it.
Right. So, but did we actually, we took a formal vote to split,
On the
to
sidewalk.
allow, on the sidewalk. And so the public is aware, we did, correct.
Excluding the parking spaces.
Correct.
Correct.
All right, so just for the public's sake, at a site walk, which was a public meeting, we split the notice of intent into two parts. One was to repair and replace the macadam surface, the parking surface that currently exists. And the additional parking spaces was severed because they were looking to put in 4 new parking places. And I believe some of the abutters were concerned with that, and they brought up an issue as to whether or not that would violate a conservation restriction that was signed back in 1983 or 93.
Yeah,
90, 89, 90.
You were here then, right?
It was. I see the signatures. I don't see the date.
90.
90,
One's 89, one's 90.
right, right,
They're all approximate.
1989.
Yeah.
yeah. So they will,
Acceptance of the gift of the foregoing the conservation restriction is hereby found to be in the public interest and is accepted by the Milton Conservation Commission the 13th day of September, 1989. And it also says 1990, so yeah, I guess you can take your choice.
Both of them.
so the work that we allowed at the sidewalk is to clean up that whole area where water was flowing into the wetland that shouldn't have been off the parking lot. Is that right? Doing the plantings as well, and,
It controlled the flow of water.
okay,
The plunge pool,
right.
the curb, the new
Yeah.
blacktop,
And new plantings there
and new planting.
To mediate the flow.
to mitigate that. Okay,
Pretty much everything that we talked about with the exception of the addition of the parking space.
okay.
Right. So if are there abutters here? That we were all present when this happened, so any abutters that have any questions, or members of the public as well. But Sarah, I know you'd like to ask something or make a comment, and Madam as well.
So just to clarify, they're
Just to identify yourself and come forward,
You have to
please.
come forward and use the microphone, if you would. You have to get close to the microphone so that the broadcast can pick that up.
Susan, you're going to be on TV a little bit.
It's a big day.
Susan Flukes, and I'm in a butter. Just to clarify, they're going to not do any of the parking spaces. They've abandoned that for now, and
Well, now,
The-
that's
Postpone.
correct.
Well,
Or- yeah.
not any of the parking spaces, the 4 parking spaces.
The new ones. They're going to repave
Additional
the
ones.
existing areas. They're going to put a curb in, repave the existing areas because it's eroding and falling apart.
right.
They're not going to do any new spaces that don't currently exist.
Is it possible to get a copy of that letter?
Of this? Oh, absolutely.
Oh, it's just a little email?
It's just a little email, yes. But Kathy, will you make a copy of this?
But Susan, in the file is a description of what they'll be doing. You can see all of that if you want to just talk to Kathy. In the file, there's a complete description of what this work entails, so that you can look at it if you want.
Okay. And did you receive the updated versions of those agreements? There was some question
Yes.
because some of them weren't,
We
the
did.
ones I had 2 that were signed and 2 that weren't, but the planning department found the rest of those documents.
Yeah, we got copies,
We
the
got copies.
conservation restrictions.
And I just printed one of them. I happen to have grant number 1 in my hand. The other ones I didn't have time to print at my house.
John, mentioning grant number 1, would you take a look at page 3? Because it's very precise in section 2
Right?
about a number of conditions, several of which we found problems with. And reading this evening before the meeting, it strikes me that I'd be more comfortable with an opportunity to go back periodically and make sure that these conditions are continuously maintained because of the severity of the conditions that we found on our initial site walk.
I think that's a good idea. And for the public's benefit, when we did our first site walk, which was 2 months ago, I guess, there were deplorable conditions in the wetlands. There was a lot of trash. And this is the area between Winter Valley and Highland Street. And there's a beautiful wetland there, and it didn't look very pretty. and it was in tough shape. But Winter Valley has, I think, stepped up to the plate, and they've done some significant cleaning there. And in addition, they removed what we assume was at least part of the problem, not the whole problem, because I don't think the presence of the dumpster probably allowed some of the trash from the Winter Valley residences to blow off into the wetlands. But of course, there were old tires there as well that probably didn't blow off the top of the dumpster. They may have been deposited there by miscreants and footpads and marauders. But other than that, they've done a good job cleaning it up. And I think that the conditions that we imposed upon their new parking area, which is in the same footprint as the existing parking area, will do a great deal to mitigate the damage and erosion going down into the wetlands. So the combination of controlling the erosion and cleaning up the area, I think, is good for the town, good for the wetlands, good for the folks at Winter Valley, and good for the abutters.
Okay. And also this conservation restriction that we're referring to is overseen, as we discovered, by the Conservation Commission. And so that the public knows, it restricts further development at Winter Valley, at least until 2020. So there shouldn't be any further development there in general terms. It was a 30-year restriction, and it began in 1990 approximately.
But it's a very narrow area that 30-year restriction refers to. It's not the whole area. That's why there's so much confusion looking at those documents. It's because they were trying to delineate what areas they were talking about. And I think the property was divided into several different sections originally when it was given to the town.
Any other comments?
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Bruce.
Yeah, hi. I'm Bill Edwards. I'm an abutter, and what you were referring to is just a very small part that has a 20-year or 30-year restriction. The rest of the area, it's a perpetual restriction. And my issue is that Winter Valley signed this in 1989, and I think that they're really not able to add parking in this area. They can't do anything according to this document that they agreed to. They agreed to this document in order to get out from under their previous agreement with the abutters, which was that they would not add any units after they built their initial phase. 10 years after they built their initial phase, they decided they needed more units. They went to town meeting turned them down. And they negotiated for 6 or 8 months with the abutters and came up with this restriction. Whatever they get to do, and whatever they can do legally is fine with us, fine with me. I just would like to see who is going to oversee whether they in fact are able to do anything, because we think they're not.
Well, that's a good question, and it goes to Arthur's point. Now, your point, I think, Arthur, was that we should be doing regular inspections. And since we really don't have a staff to do that, Kathy, we only have 20% of Kathy. So we really don't have a staff to do that. But one of the things that we've talked about in the past is utilizing the public schools, because they have a community service requirement for their graduating seniors. I think they have 75 hours of community service. And that might be something that we could coordinate with the school department to see if we could get some juniors and seniors in the high school to go out and just like do an assessment and perhaps clean up areas throughout the town as a contribution to the public good.
Well, the issue is not keeping it clean. I mean, that's something that...
Right, there are two issues. You're right. I agree.
I mean, that's something that can be accomplished by monitoring. Are they able to, in fact, do what they want to do under these restrictions? Are they able to?
Mr. Edwards,
who can determine that?
On the site walk, you also, if I recall correctly, mentioned difficulties with dead trees and matters of that nature. Is that a serious matter?
No,
or?
not really. I mean, we were promised screening that we never got, and other things that we were very disappointed in the cooperation that we received, especially after having agreed to this restriction to grant them the ability to build more units. So, I mean,
So that's been worked out.
it's sort of gone away because we gave up, I would say.
Well, I just point out to the chairman, continuing our conversation, item B on page 4, the following page, that refers specifically to the way in which trees, bushes, plants, et cetera, are to be maintained there, so
There are
Add to
dead
the-
trees, there's no doubt
we
about
could
it.
add that to the monitoring process.
Yeah.
You're right, but one of the problems we have is somebody has a proposal, and they come into us and make application, either through a request for determination of applicability or a notice of intent or an abbreviated notice of intent, then we know about it. But we may not know about it, and actually there are terms and conditions that restrict the activities of Winter Valley that are outside of our wetlands jurisdiction. So all of those notices of intent and requests for determinations, those are all triggered by the State Wetlands Protection Act and the Wetlands Town Bylaw. But we might not know about something, so we really do depend upon the public to, go to see Kathy or come into a meeting and say, look, this is what's going on, you have to tell us. And we have to know, and we have to do a better job, I think, of staying in touch with the building department. Because if somebody wants, like, if they wanted to build another building, we wouldn't know about it if it's not within our jurisdiction, but it might trigger this conservation restriction. So I think we need to do a better job coordinating with the building department because they'd have to issue a permit, and if we coordinate with them, then we'd be on notice, so to speak.
But, Mr. Chairman, I think within our jurisdiction now also applies to these sort of covenants that were signed by the Conservation Commission. So now that gives us jurisdiction
It
to
does, but how do
have
we
an
know?
oversight. There should be some sort of a record of what's been signed in the past that we are responsible for, and I don't know where that record is.
Well, actually, John Cronin and others assisting him did a great job as part of the Milton, the Planning Commission. He was part of that, and he actually put together a map of the town with all of the conservation
Yes.
areas, the
Yes, we have
easements and
that.
restrictions. So it has been assembled, and the repository of that information, I don't know if it's in Town Hall or Kathy, is it at the DPW? At DPW?
Like grants, I have never seen them.
Yeah.
I don't know where they-
Yeah, see, the grants should be put onto the map, and John Cronin actually started to do that, and I don't know if he's completed the process, but remember 88 Milton Street? That easement to us, that restriction, actually should be shown on the map.
Right.
And I think it is, but I can't confirm that. I know the sliver of land that the town has right at the corner of Milton Street and Brush Hill Road, that is on the town map. But that additional component that was deeded to us, that extra half acre or so, should have been added to the map. And maybe, Kathy, could you talk to, what's the fellow's name? Alan Bishop. He's great. He's somebody that I think can help us and make sure that we have, when we get an easement like this or a restriction, that we make sure that we get it added to, we'll call it the John Cronin map. Because he was instrumental in assembling all of these areas of land that should be protected.
Is there a recommendation that you could make as to who I would go to see if in fact anything that they want to do is
Kathy.
in violation of this restriction?
Kathy, the other 80% of what you see here tonight is DPW responsibility. So 20% comes to the Conservation Commission and 80% goes to DPW. So Kathy is in a great position to coordinate. A lot of responsibility. I don't mean to dump it on you, Kathy.
Yeah,
Notify you, right,
yeah,
find out,
okay.
Winter Valley is in the process of proposing the new sewer water line or something like that.
Yeah.
You need to go to DPW.
Or 4 parking spots.
Arthur?
John, I like the idea that you put forward relative to students, particularly students that would be in environmental science courses,
Yeah.
and preferably in an AP environmental science course. And we can take a look at that with respect to any of the schools, Milton Academy, Fontbonne, Milton High School, even students at Kerry College that may be in related courses. But that's going to require some oversight, coordination, and we only have 20% of the time, right? I think.
We'll give that to
So-
Kathy,
He
too.
who thinks of a great idea gets to implement it.
What I'm leading up to, and I think you probably know the path I'm going down, something that we talked about briefly at the retreat, and that was the degree of time that the town has for a conservation agent relative to other communities. And maybe one of the things that we need to do is take a look at this and give you some information, and then maybe when you have your conversations with the warrant committee, can present some information that would give a
Improve.
sense of what it is that's really needed rather than what it is that we have. We have a
It's a
terrific
good idea,
person,
right.
but how much can one person carry?
That's
in
a
an 80-20
good,
split?
it's a good idea, it's a good comment, and for members of the public, if you don't know this, and many of us are town meeting members, but each year we approve a budget, and for, I don't know how long I've been a town meeting member, a long time. 100 years? The budget for the Conservation Commission is $2,500. So we don't have a lot of money to do things, and I think that's a good idea, and maybe we could approach the warrant committee and see if we could get, not for us, we don't get any money, that's not what the point is. But the point is, if we had a larger component of a personnel salary, we could have somebody that could spend more time coordinating with the school department, getting student volunteers, reaching out to some of the other resources that we have in the town.
I'd be happy to do the homework on that since you were sort of leading out in my direction.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
Thank you very
Sounds
much.
good, thanks. Any other comments, questions from abutters or members of the public? I guess is really, since it's been withdrawn, we don't need a motion for anything. The matter is closed. All right. Thank you. And Mrs. Fuchs, you can get a copy of this from Kath, okay? All right, thank you. Next on the agenda is 51 Highland Lane. This is a vacant lot next to number 51 Highland Lane, I guess.
Yeah, just
Yeah,
pull
sure.
it down a little bit. That's good. Yeah.
You can, facing the public, we have copies of the drawings. Thank you.
You may want to pick up that microphone. It makes it easier for the broadcast folks and the people at home. Yes, sir.
Good evening, my name is John Cavanero. I'm a civil engineer for Cavanero Consulting in Norwell. I'm here with the applicant, Mr. Tom Corcoran, this evening. We are both here on behalf of the owner, Joseph Corcoran, who owns 51 Highland Lane, which is the original occupant of this new lot, which we're here to talk about this evening. Lot A, as shown on our site plan, is a new lot that was created through a Form A subdivision of this land with a planning board approval because we took frontage off of an existing public way, Highland Lane. The lot is over 40,000 square feet, and it is sufficient, obvious area, width, and frontage. The proposal that we're in front of you this evening is a notice of intent to construct a new single-family home within 100 feet of a bordering vegetated wetland that is located off of the northeast corner of the locust property, Lot A. This is a wetland that we had flagged by professional wetland scientist John Zimmer from South River Environmental. We included a narrative in our notice of intent that delineates and discusses the fauna and flora that are present in this wetland. This wetland is actually the low point of a drainage easement that burdens this Lot A, and essentially it's the street drainage from Highland Lane that gets collected in a series of catch basins and daylights into a drain pipe that ultimately drains into this wetland. This is the same wetland that you referred to earlier that backs up to
Winter Valley?
Yeah.
Yeah.
The existing lot itself today is it's essentially the developed side yard lawn of 51 Highland. It also includes a clay tennis court in the back portion of this lot that's historically been serviced and part of the 51 Highland. That's planned to stay. What's being added is a grass walking path that will connect to the existing, the proposed single-family home, and there'll be a proposed driveway that will connect to Highland Lane. This property and this lot is serviced by municipal sewer within the sewer district, so we'll be connecting to that, as well as other underground utilities to service the proposed dwelling. This property is not within a floodplain as designated in the latest FEMA map. And what we're proposing during construction is to have a siltation barrier along the entire easterly boundary and then over and connected to the fence that surrounds the tennis court. So that'll be in place during construction. A silt sock that'll be installed obviously prior to construction and maintained throughout construction. The house is situated approximately 40 feet to its nearest point from the BVW. At its nearest point, you can see the 25-foot buffer that is around the BVW and the 100-foot buffer, as shown on the plan. The way the lot will be contoured is we'll have a grass swale that will drain the front yard down in an elongated path to have a long treatment train from the front yard around the back of the house toward the rear yard. Similarly, we'll have another grass swale that'll run along the northeasterly boundary that'll run also towards the wetland.
What, the tennis court that's shown
Yes.
there, does that currently belong to that house?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. So this whole intent is for the current owner to build this and live here. So the owner of 51 will be the new owner of this lot. So he wanted to keep the tennis court with him. This property is not located in an estimated habitat of rare and wildlife, rare and endangered wildlife, rather. And there are no vernal pools within the area of this property.
Is there a pond in the area?
There's, other than the wetland, no.
Can you hold on just a minute?
Okay.
Thanks. Well, other than the wetland, is there an area that holds water?
The wetland holds water.
Okay. Sometimes wetlands don't. I
Yeah,
mean,
this wetland
is wet.
is wet.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean,
Again,
can you skate on it? Can you swim in it? Or
No, it's pretty much a drainage. I think it's essentially an old-fashioned detention basin, frankly. That's what it looks like, historically. The way
A
the drain-
detention basin, what are you referring to? On the property or off the property? Or?
No, it's not on the property. You can see that it actually borders the edge of the property. It probably was a wetland, a long-standing wetland, but back when, years ago, oftentimes subdivisions did not include, this is pre-stormwater, DEP stormwater management standards, and they wouldn't build a conventional detention basin, so they would drain to wetlands. That's what this looks like to me.
Okay.
I think just next to this lot, as you're heading down the street, in fact, there is a pond there. It's a pond that's there probably 9 or 10 months out of the year. I'm sure people can speak to it more directly, but I've seen it myself. I've seen wood ducks on that pond, and wood ducks usually come about 6 months out of the year. They're not endangered, but they're somewhat unusual. So it's kind of a precious little area. It's not on your property, but it's in that area, I'd have to say.
Okay, now, just so that members of the public are aware, we typically will do a site walk when somebody comes in and has a proposal, and part of the proposal identifies the location for wetlands or resource areas. We go out and walk through the bushes and check it out. And I think that that's appropriate in this instance. And I think you've heard just from tonight that we're planning on having a public meeting on Saturday, the 31st. And if we start at Winter Valley, I'm sorry.
We don't know where we're gonna start, probably.
Yeah, that's right, okay. Okay, well, in any event, we start somewhere at 8 a.m. So
Be
soon
announced.
thereafter, we would be out touring this area. Are you available, or is your wetlands sign, is it John Zimmer?
Yes.
You think he might be available? Because sometimes we'll ask for him or her, whatever the case may be, to use the auger and, give us a demonstration, show us some of the soil samples.
Okay, sure, we'll make that happen.
Okay, all right. If you stay in touch with Kathy, in fact, before the night is out, we'll probably have figured out a time, but you don't have to stick around for it. Just call her back,
Okay.
and we'll have an agenda, and
Is that
you'll
okay
know
with
where
you,
we're going to
Tom?
be.
Sorry?
Is that okay with you?
You know?
The 31st, yeah, I mean, couple questions. Okay, so on the plan, do you want to comment on that?
Go ahead.
Well, actually, I wanted to, so the plan as it's drawn right now implies that the edge of the wetland is actually held back from the 25-foot buffer. Is that the case, that the lawn actually runs to the graphic representation of the wetland?
Actually, there's a tree line that comes, this is the.
Oh, that's a tree line
That's a
that-
tree line, yeah.
okay.
And this is a landscaped edge that runs into the tree line. So the lawn does go down to the edge of the tree line, and this drops off. This all
Which
slopes
line is the landscape line?
right here.
Oh, that's
This is-
the landscape
yeah, this
line.
is all landscape.
And then everything outside, everything on the wetland side of that is natural?
Correct. This is tree line. The landscape is a tighter
Yep.
scalloped edge, and that runs like
Okay.
this.
But everything outside of that landscape line is natural, is not manicured?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah. This is all lawn on the inside, but on
Yep.
the outside, it's not.
Can you, it's
Yeah, I'm not
partially
sure.
my
I
eyesight.
don't know.
I can't see the angle.
Yeah.
Can you just show us which one is which? I see a tighter scalloped line, and I see a looser one.
Yeah, this is landscaping, the
Okay.
tighter line that borders the tennis court, comes around, and it ties back into the tree line that runs like this.
Okay.
And everything outside the first landscape line you showed is natural?
Outside meaning in this direction?
Nope, the
No,
other
the other
side.
one.
Yeah, this is landscaping.
Oh, that's landscaping. So, okay,
Landscaping.
that's what I was asking, is what's the limit of the landscaping relative to the 25-foot buffer?
Well, it goes right up to the tree line.
It does go to the tree line,
Yeah,
okay.
fairly.
All right, any other questions from commissioners?
Just in terms of the tennis court, is there runoff from you said it's a clay court?
Mm-hmm.
So it's appropriately graded? So there's no significant runoff from the clay court, or there is?
No, I mean, it's an elevated court.
Yep.
So, and it sort of drops off on two sides. And this is lower, so then it grades up towards the court itself. But the court is fairly level.
It's fairly level.
Yeah.
But there isn't erosion or anything happening, carrying, no?
No, not that we noticed.
No, I saw the notification of the underground propane tank. Any further comments on that, other than
Just that's the plan, to have an underground propane tank.
what's the size?
Do you have,
I think the excavation is 5 by 12, but the tank is somewhat smaller,
Okay,
probably 3 by 10, 3 by 8.
thank you.
And that's just because you're outside the natural gas lines, or?
Correct, no natural gas
There's
on
no-
the street.
All right, any other questions from commissioners?
Just
About
the
it?
only one relative to the tank is there any chance to maximize the distance where you plant that relative to the wetland? Is there any chance to,
It has setbacks, I believe, of 10 feet from the house and from the property line. So we're trying to leave it with some proximity to the driveway, so when they refill the tank, they can.
could you put it up next to the garage, just to up on the slope, just to get it away, you know, kind of.
Yeah, we could look at possibly sliding that.
Oh, I'm sorry. They need you to speak into a microphone because we're on public TV.
Yeah, we could look at.
And actually, Tom, to identify yourself.
Tom Corcoran, I'm the applicant here. We could look at possibly sliding the location of the propane tank further forward, but we do have to maintain a setback. I believe it's 10 feet from the house and 10 feet from the property line.
Okay. But theoretically, you could stick it up next to the garage, up near the driveway, and
It looks,
Well, it starts
it's
to
a
get
little tight
actually
there.
tight,
Okay.
but
okay. I'm just
And to go to the other side of the house, it becomes kind of a distance for the truck that
Go
comes
on.
to
we-
refill.
we're also trying
If
to
it's
actually keep it off of this drainage easement. That was why it's sited where it is right now. So to go 10 feet off the house, we start to get closer into that drainage easement.
Okay. Thank you.
Any other questions? Butters? Members of the public?
Good evening. My name is Ella Wells, and I'm in a butter. I live at 179 Highland Street. So if you look at that map, I probably cover at least half of that drainage line. I border that drainage line. I've lived there since 1980, and I concur with Commissioner Kemp. There has been a pond there. There have been ducks there that my poodles have chased. My poodles have gotten wet and muddy in that pond. And I'm very surprised that that pond is nowhere shown on this diagram. I don't know now whether it's that wet because we're at the end of a summer, a very hot summer. But it certainly is wet 9 months out of the year. And my concern is if they're not, why the pond isn't shown here. My concern is the location of this building. I would prefer that it be further away from this whole drainage area. I haven't seen any hydraulic reports, and I would request, I think it would be good for there to be an independent engineer to look at the water, the groundwater, and the stormwater runoff. Because over the years that I've lived there, I don't know if you all recall that 100-year storm we had. We had a river coming down from this property, and it didn't just go down to Winter Valley, but it went down our property all the way down to Martin Road, all the way down to Reedsdale Road. Now, granted, that was a 100-year storm, but what I'm saying is this drainage, I don't know how clear it is, this whole drainage piping situation. But my concern is, has anybody reviewed it? Is it clogged? Is this construction going to cause more water to come on our
Hey,
property?
Can I hold you before?
Yeah, sure.
You said piping.
Well, you had mentioned that there was a drain pipe going to Winter Valley. I heard that earlier
It
today.
doesn't go to Winter Valley. There's a drain line that collects the street runoff,
Mhm.
and it drains to this wetland.
I don't have a wetland on my property, although it gets damp, so when you're pointing to it, it's really going down towards Winter Valley. That's where the conservation easement is.
And just to answer the question why we don't have a pond shown on the plan is, we show the locust property and the edge of the bordering vegetated, the wetland resource area that's burdening our lot, and we show the buffer zones to that. We wouldn't show, unless there was another resource area that brought buffer zones onto our property, we wouldn't show that. So we show the closest wetland to our property.
But isn't a pond a wetland?
Well, if the pond is beyond 100 feet from our property, then the buffer zones don't, there's no jurisdictional areas on our property.
Where the property line is, I could point out where my property is.
Okay.
And the pond was beyond my property line. So my property line is here, and I would stand here at the edge of my property, and I would see the pond right here. It wasn't here, it was on this side of the fence, right there. So this is the location of where I have experienced a pond being for 35 years, sorry.
All right, well, in defense of the diagram, I think for jurisdictional purposes, we need to see that which is closest to the project, because that extends our jurisdiction. So I don't, I don't think that there's any attempt to hide the pond, because we're going to go out and see it anyway. But you said something a little bit different, because it seems to be a whole lot closer than I thought it was. I mean, is it on the property line, or?
Very close to the property
Very close.
line, very close.
Very close.
All right.
So part of it might be on the next neighbor's line, but it isn't, because if I look at my fence, it's really beyond my fence going towards the Joe Corcoran's land.
All right.
I think a site visit will probably
Yeah,
answer a lot of
I
these
think
questions.
that makes good sense if we're all there, and it's, I don't think there's an issue making it open to the public, is there? Sometimes that happens, but
I don't
it
think
is
so.
a public meeting, thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you. Are there any other, I don't mean to cut you off either, but are there other comments or suggestions or questions? Because I think it's appropriate that we take a visit on Saturday morning, the 31st. And again, if folks can stay in touch with Kathy, it's actually on the Milton Town website too, the agenda, and that'll tell the folks at home, where we're going and at what time we expect to be there. But if we start at 8, well, I'm sure we'll be here somewhere in the vicinity of 9 to 9:30.
I'd just like a little further clarification about the drainage off of Highland Lane into the Butland area. Can you give us a little bit of additional background on that, please?
Well, all that I know is that the street drainage collects into two catch basins here,
Right.
to a manhole, and it discharges into a pipe
And
and daylights into the wetland.
that pipe is within your property bound?
Correct, yeah. It's within that drainage easement. That's why there's an easement on our property.
I see it. Thank you.
Where is the pipe on the map? Is it shown on the map, that
No,
drainage pipe?
it's not. The pipe isn't. The easement is,
Okay.
Is it underground?
yes. We'll see it when we go out to the
Okay, good, thank you.
Yeah, I want to also go on the record to say, I think Mr. Corcoran has built beautiful houses in Milton. I really love the area on Fletcher Steel that he's built, beautiful, elegant homes. So I am sure that this is going to be a beautiful house, but my concern is the drainage, and to make sure that whatever new landscaping is done, it doesn't exacerbate and end up with an overflow onto our property, which then will affect the downhill neighbors.
Oh, absolutely. It's a legitimate concern, and I think it's probably one of Tom's concerns as well.
In the proposal, are you proposing to collect 100% of the impervious area and put it into into dry wells, or?
What we're proposing is to collect all of the roof area, the clean runoff, and to send them into recharge units on the property. So to
I don't
collect.
understand what
Well,
recharging means.
they'll go into
Dry wells.
dry wells, essentially, that will go into the ground because it's clean runoff from the roof. So we'll put it right back into the ground to recharge the groundwater.
And the runoff from the new pavement?
Well, it'll drain more towards the street to drain into these catch basins.
So it's all back out
So
on the street?
yeah,
and
it
then
gets,
back in.
it gets treated in those structures.
One of the things I'd like to point out, when we were building the addition to our house, the land in that area behind where we built our house, it's almost like clay. So when we were starting to build the property in the spring, and we had to wait till it got dry because the water would not go down. So I'm just wondering, when you do a dry well, how deep do you go, and does it actually absorb the water or not? Because if it's clay type.
It's a great question. It's a great question, and I wish Craig McNaught were here, because he's a longtime member of the Conservation Commission. He was on it for about 15 years back in the late 80s and 90s, and then again more recently. And that was one of his great concerns, that we never asked for perk tests. And people would say, oh, we're going to put a dry well here or there. And we were at one on Park Drive, and it was like the table. It was clay. You could put a drop of water, it wouldn't go anywhere. It would just sit there. There was no drainage. And at that point, with Craig's nagging us, we started to ask people for, and I say that respectfully, that nagging is not the right word, but he encouraged us to ask the question that you just asked. And that is to make sure
Right.
that if you're going to put a roof drain into a dry well, that it is sufficiently deep, or the materials that are used inside the dry well are such that it'll actually accommodate.
Well, we were
that.
so concerned about it because of the delay in our building that we actually put piping all around our house, the pool house, and in fact, the tennis court, to make sure that drainage was proper, and it's all on file in the town hall. So that's why I'm particularly concerned, because the type of clay soil, the fact that we already have wetlands there, I don't want dry wells to stop bursting forth with water. It's
Right.
gonna end up.
And I think that's a fair concern, Tom. I think you can probably accommodate that and do some testing to make sure that whatever the material is there, it is, sufficiently absorbent to take care of the water that you expect to go into. Make sense, right?
Yes.
Any other thoughts?
I just want to go back to the easement for a second. How far does the easement extend?
It goes our entire length of our property.
It ends at your property line?
Well, it burdens us. It does not, I don't think it goes beyond because it's in the wetland at that point.
Okay. Let's check that out. I'd be very interested in seeing if it stops there.
All right. Any other thoughts, comments, members of the public, abutters? Anyone? So we don't know the time, but it will be relatively early Saturday morning, the 31st of October. All right? Perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is notice of intent 50 Wendell Park.